Talking about fuel for a moment. Jet fuel prices and the price of crude are lashed together pretty well. You can see the two charts here just run in parallel essentially. China, which was once self-sufficient in oil before the big run-up in the liberalization of manufacturing over there, now imports over 40% of its oil. It is now a competitor to the West in buying oil from the Middle East or wherever. And if you project a China effect, in other words, this very sudden ramp up of a very large population into automobiles and a more aggressive industry using energy, that effect on oil prices is probably permanent and it'll impact aviation forever. Now what I've shown you here is a chart that I drew with my own projections of where I thought oil would go based on history and based on the demands of Asia. In September of '06, it was way off this chart. That shows you the dangers of predicting. But oil will probably come back down and settle into the $50, $45 range in the not too distant future. I think we're all seeing lower prices at the pump these days. What's that mean to aviation? Well, it's a big deal. I'm showing you two charts here, 2004 and 2006, which show you the direct operating cost of a 737 with the cost broken down to show the crew cost, the direct maintenance, depreciation and rent, and fuel. As you can see, fuel now is about half the direct operating cost. The crew costs have actually gone down because of some of the negotiations to reduce labor rates. So today, we find that what aircraft manufacturers and airlines care about is the efficiency of the aircraft. And you're reading about it, seeing it, and you're working on projects more than ever to reduce the operating cost of an airliner. Was there any good news in higher fuel prices? Well, the inefficient planes are going to the desert. They're out there in droves today. And the surviving airlines are going to be buying more efficient airplanes, almost without question. And I expect to see at least a decade-long surge in new orders. And in fact, we had record orders last year. And what drove those orders? Fuel efficiency. We're already benefiting from this, and we will continue to benefit for a long time. It's good news for Goodrich. Aviation has come a long way. How many people ever saw a 707 take off before any of the clean burners were put in? Well, it was pretty ugly. That's what it looked like in those days. Today, we're cleaner, we're quieter, more fuel efficient than ever, but there's a lot of work that needs to go on still. Thus, I mentioned this at the outset, one of the conclusions of the study was that the winning suppliers are going to be the people who really invest and have R&D roadmaps to give you energy efficient, environmentally friendly aviation. Got to have it. It's going to happen. Now here's something for your do list. And by the way, if you carry cameras with you, I want you to take pictures and send them to me. When you see pictures of children's art at the airport, you know, the class, second grade class goes out to the airport, they take a tour, they go back and they make some drawings and they send them back. This is what they used to look like years ago. Today, there's no smoke. This picture I took up at Burlington just not too long ago. The kids don't see any exhaust coming out of an airplane. It's pretty profound. Aviation is really working very hard to protect the environment. There's a lot of great work going on. Goodrich is involved in a great deal of it. The QTD-2 test was a dramatic test that Goodrich participated in a couple years, or last year rather, with great success. Just a good example of the kind of work that Goodrich is doing to make aviation a better neighbor. Well, there are a lot of forces reshaping the industry, and I won't try and get into all of them. Cities and airports play a big role in this whole thing. Cities need air service. They're going to work hard to get air service. They're going to provide services so an airline can come there. Globalization is a factor. If you look at the traditional airlines, you've got the new investors versus the old investors who are getting wiped out through bankruptcy and so forth. Labor, pensions, a lot of different factors that are hitting this airlines business today. What Goodrich is doing is watching and adjusting as quickly as it can to support the shape this industry is going to take. And I'll touch on some of those things as we go along. I just want to add that the unpleasantness you see going on out there, and some of you probably have friends in the airline business who are going through this, just has to play out. This is a free enterprise system, folks, and when we deregulated back in 1978, we turned the dogs loose on this industry to reshape it, and it's happening. Well, capital plays a major role in this industry. Now remember, under regulation, the airlines wanted as much cost and much capital in their system as possible because they were guaranteed a return. That's what regulation is, guaranteed a return. All the rest of us, we suppliers, for example, got a free ride. Ship it out the door to that airline, it was glad to get it. Not a lot of price pressure, nothing to worry about, let it rip. Well, under deregulation, you can already start to see a shift in where the capital is in this industry. Aircraft leasers picking up a bigger part of the load. We could see in 5 years, we could see half of all aircraft in the U.S. at least leased. Could happen. You're also seeing suppliers get more involved, flight hour agreements, the things like we do in wheels and brakes. The simple truth is that fewer airlines have money to buy aircraft today, so they're leasing. So the leasing companies now are a big part of the whole story in aviation today. Thus, you're going to have a strong balance sheet if you're going to be a winning supplier going forward, because you're going to have to support your product. You may own your product and service through these flight hour agreements. And we don't know what the models are going to look like, but you're going to have to adapt to those as time goes on. Well, we're aggressively developing flight hour agreements today with airlines and doing a lot of great work in that whole area. I'm very pleased at what Goodrich is up to. Now, one of the interesting things about flight hour agreements is it suggests that you own the product. It goes into service, but you still own it. You got to keep track of it, first of all. But it says something about you're going to design this thing for the lowest possible cost, high yield, low scrap, low rebuild cost. You're going to price it at the market price, but you want a decent margin on it when you do that. Performance, you want maximum on-wing time, right? You want predictable performance. You don't want any early removals. You'd like to have the highest possible standardization and commonality so you can reduce your inventories as well. So these kind of agreements drive a different business model within the Goodrich companies. This is where 3P comes in. I think you'll find that it's a very helpful tool. And this is one of the areas, these flight hour agreements and driving us to manage our assets better, or design and manage our assets better, is where CI is going to play a significant role as time goes on. And these flight hour agreements also drive the need for asset management, as I mentioned. And that's part of why you see all the work going on in the back office, all the money we're spending, all the work we're putting in, all the assets we're allocating to getting our SAP up and running common across the company so that we can better manage our assets when they're in service. Very, very quickly, I want to tell you a relevant story about AT&T. They were a regulated monopoly as well. They were broken up in 1982, Judge Green. Competition brought in new models, the Sprints and other people that you know, new technology, lower costs. They had 100 years of building up their infrastructure, but when it came time to compete, they found out it's just a phone call. That's all it is. Their regulation had formed the culture of AT&T. It also formed their cost structure, which is very hard to ever break. You may remember, some of you, that once upon a time, you didn't own your phone. The phone company did. They put a phone in. Today, we all own our phones, of course. But back then, they provided end-to-end, ear-to-ear capital structure from the phone all the way to the other phone. Western Electric was a division of AT&T, and they built the product. Suppliers had a very small role in this whole thing. When deregulation came along, it showed that they really had no competitive skills whatsoever at AT&T. Their cost structure couldn't change. It just wouldn't yield. The culture wouldn't change at all. AT&T is gone today. The brand is still there, but AT&T is gone. They once were a giant. In many ways, the legacy airlines have been operating like that. They waited too long in many cases to respond to deregulation. It's very hard, especially when you have a union labor force, to respond to deregulation that comes along as quickly as that did. So the last 5 years have clearly been ugly in this business. There was a time here not too long ago when United reported a loss of $17 billion. It's a staggering sum. So it makes the next logical step, hate it though I do, to look at consolidations induced by Chapter 11. Well, who's going to remain? Well, you don't want to try and predict this one. It's too hard. I think I did and failed. But Delta, for example, is an airline that's looking for a partner right now. They need to consolidate with somebody. The survival skills of these airlines are very good, and you watch U.S. Air go through this agony, and ultimately U.S. Air disappeared. The brand is still there, the assets are still there, the shareholders were wiped out, and it's combined now with America West, and may be successful. But don't be alarmed. Consolidation isn't new. This is a chart that shows many of the interstate, regional, and trunk airlines and what became of them as time went on. You can see that TWA went into American some time ago, and now you can see that U.S. Air has disappeared into America West, renamed U.S. Air. Since deregulation, there have been 162 bankruptcy filings. 162, and you remember I mentioned there had been none before that. Let it play out. Let it play out. Give our customers our support. Be ready for the changes that are going to take place. Well, we're likely to see new business models, and many of them. My favorite one is this one. That's you and me. We helped fund U.S. Air in bankruptcy. And in fact, they paid that loan back when they merged with America West. Good news for the taxpayers, for once. You may even see something as absurd as plane by the hour, in which all the airline does is sells tickets and flies it. We're very close to that in some cases. Outsource air, well, you don't need to do a whole lot these days. If you fly to Las Vegas, for example, they have a thing called common terminal equipment. And you can fly in there, and they'll provide you with your counter agent and all the services you need. You don't need to do anything. So new airlines can supply them in a hurry with transportation. And of course, the leasing companies. We don't know where GE's headed. All I can say is that they see this as a time to increase their ownership in the aviation business, and they are doing it in spades. Look behind the scenes of some of the mergers, look behind the scenes of some of the purchases of aircraft today, and you'll see GE or GE Leasing involved. A lot of new business models out there that we have to address. So if you're a supplier, you're going to have to be pretty flexible to adapt to these new business models, and I'm very happy to say that we're doing that at Goodrich. And if you look around, you'll see what's going on there today. A thing that gets a lot of talk these days is the air taxi business. It's been a long-held dream for this industry that there would someday be a way to make a call and have a plane show up close to you and have it take you where you want to go. We may be on the verge of that right now. The very light jets are delivering, they're certified, coming along. Will we serve this industry? I don't have an answer for you today, but I'll bet you will find a way to be a player in that industry. Honda's going to build jets. Honda is going to build jets. Well, got a very unique aircraft, and they are clearly trying to bring some automotive manufacturing principles to the whole process. I wouldn't bet against them, although it's hard to bet on them right now. Are we going to serve this customer? I'll bet you we'll find a way to do that. What you'll see is that within Goodrich, our organizations will evolve to support these new business models. The boss is going to make sure we do. We're not going to pass up any opportunities to be there as aviation evolves. 3P, we talked about that briefly. Production preparation process. In the automotive world that I came from, it's called APQP, Advanced Product Quality Planning. It's a very, very robust process. Demands a very high level of customer involvement early on, and that's the important thing here. It's got a lot of tools that we're talking about here, voice of the customer, DFMEA, PFMEA, design for manufacturability and assembly, all those great tools. And it just guarantees a better outcome. Aerospace has got to get to this level. This is a great tool, a great set of tools. We've got to get there. 3P is going to be our tool from within the Stride kit, if you will. I have a little story to tell, real quick. There was a time when I was running a company back in the Midwest that made fuel injection coils for General Motors. The goal was 4 parts per million failures, no more than. We built 1.4 million parts, and then we had a failure. And the very next day, I'm sitting at my desk at the credenza, and a guy from Delphi gets past the plant guard, gets past the receptionist, gets past my secretary, marches in and drops down in the chair and says, "Hey." I turn around, and there's a guy I'd never seen before, and he said, "We had a failure on a fuel injection coil yesterday." I said, "Really?" And I just happened to know that we had hit the 1.4 million units shipped mark on this product. It was a great production line. We did a lot of things right. We had customer involvement, but we had a failure. And I said, "Wow, I hate to see that, but you know, we've shipped 1.4 million. I guess that's not too bad." And he said, "No." He said, "Something's wrong, isn't it?" And I said, "Yeah, it is." He says, "Why don't we go to the plant and let's go see what's going on?" Well, it took 3 days, but we found a small cracked spring in a resistance welder on one machine, on one of 7 lines, I think it was. And that was the source of a weak weld that led to an open coil in the field. Over the next few weeks, another 4 or 5 of these failed parts trickled in. But it gives you a sense of where the customer believes they need to get to today. Saying 4 parts per million sounds pretty impressive, but building a system that can give you 0 defects is what you need to be doing. In fact, within the APQP processes, designing a process for anything other than 0 defects is not acceptable. Can you imagine setting up an automated line and saying it's going to produce 4 bad parts per year, per million? I don't think so. I don't think so. Very important to remember. You know, we don't have a lot of high volume in aerospace, but the processes of CI can apply greatly and help us reduce things like the cost of poor quality. Cost of poor quality in this industry overall is really unacceptably bad. When I dealt with Toyota, Toyota would ask us, "What is your cost of poor quality?" They wanted to know that number before they ever started dealing with you, because that number reflects your commitment to continuous improvement. And that's why you're seeing it being metricized in this company today and why it's going to be such an important figure. It'll be on the wall in Marshall's office. I think a lot of the tools within Stride are great. I think this group here has to help and push for that implementation of Stride in all of our units around the world. Hey, Ford's been in the news lately, most of it bad. I was a supplier to Ford in the early 1970s. I dealt with them every day. I dealt with them at the plant level. I dealt with them through some pretty tough times. I watched them try and put into place a CI program. But along the way, over the years, Ford kept changing management at the top. There was Caldwell, and there was somebody after that, and Jacques, whatever his name was. But they didn't have a consistent message of continuous improvement in the company. They did not. They couldn't maintain it. They fell. And all they got were really sporadic results out of this whole thing. They didn't future-proof the organization, if you will. By now you know that Alan Mulally from Boeing has moved over to Ford. I wish him good luck because the first thing he's going to find is that he's got a massive cultural change that he has to make take place. You may have caught this story in the Wall Street Journal here recently where Toyota decided to slow down new vehicle introductions because they were experiencing quality problems in the field. Pretty remarkable. Every company struggles with growth, and that's what Toyota has, by the way. They're growing. They are growing dramatically, and they're taking it out of Ford's hide and GM's hide, and deservedly so, because they're very good at what they do. But I would ask you, how many companies would really sacrifice top-line sales for quality? You know, Toyota would. Proved it. Put their money where their mouth is. This is a very tough decision to make, but they did it, and I think it just reflects the power of their organization, internal organization, on the quality side. Automotive has a lot of lessons that we can pass on to the rest of the world. We used to have a thing that became known as creeping product development, where you kind of get in and say, hey, that's a great idea, let's do some of that, I think we can do it. Customers are going to love this thing. You start spending money on it, but too late do you get the customer involved and find out that it's not quite what he wanted it the other way around, left-handed instead of right-handed or whatever. And you find yourself out doing new tools, and you find yourself starting over. It's the worst possible thing you can do in new product development. Within the automotive world, we discovered that the best thing to do is to get in early, invest heavily up front, get the customer involved, and that is most likely to lead to success. I note here that we talk about process capability. In case of GM and Toyota, they often would require us to have full process capability demonstrated on production tools that are locked to the floor 1 year before production start for the new vehicle, and throw canvas covers over it until that time. Pretty serious commitment, but it works. That's all part of this process. Get the customer in early, make sure you know what he wants, exactly what he'll buy. Cost reduce it up front, not later. Get the tools right, get your process capability up, and then throw the switch for production. And that's what the Goodrich LPD process is trying to capture. We say it in different terms here at Goodrich, but we're trying to get it right up front. Do it right, get the customer involved, get that voice of the customer, get the tooling right, get the capability, and then launch, and you can guarantee that your learning curve is going to be a lot shallower and have a lot less waste in it. So voice of the customer is a very, very critical aspect of what we're doing in Stride, and I really like what I see. Well, how critical is the voice of the customer? I'll give you a perfect example from our industry. Anybody remember this aircraft? Boeing's customer said, we don't want your darn Sonic Cruiser. And they listened, and it was painful. They spent 18 months, I believe, of development work and activity on this aircraft, only to have the customers say, go away. But they did say, give us a long-range, high-efficiency, point-to-point airliner. That's what we want. We want to replace them for the 767 now. And that's where the 787 came from. And just as I showed you a DC-3 earlier, I'll show it to you again. When the DC-3 came out in the 1930s, if your airline didn't have them, you weren't going to be an airline. The 787 is taking on that same kind of importance. If you're flying long-range, point-to-point, and you haven't got orders for 787s, you're probably in trouble right now. One of the nice things about the 787 is that it really pushed our friends at Boeing to rethink the supply chain. This is a rendering of the plane, which is now flying, the large cargo freighter. What they have done, of course, is reduce their overall supply base and put a lot more responsibility in suppliers like ourselves to take on more systems responsibility. They want us to take on a larger role. I think we're doing a great job. Some of our integration activities that are going on at Goodrich are fantastic. It aligns us very nicely with what Boeing wants and what Airbus will want and what will be the model for the future in this business. As you know, the 787 is truly a world airliner today. Boeing has selected the best suppliers no matter where they are, and they're all over the world, and they found a way to make this work. For us to be a global corporation, we've got to make global sourcing part of our comfort zone, if you will. We've got to be more aggressive in going after global sourcing. We've got to partner with the best suppliers, and by that I mean best price, best quality, best delivery, and the best future. You want a supplier that can take you into the future. And it doesn't matter where they are on the planet. We've made the commitment. We're spending money. We're working hard. We are frustrated right now. I think what we need from the CI group, this is Ed Hart speaking, I'm not running supply chain. You need to over-support the supply chain guys, and let's get some success stories out there that we can really leverage off of. We need to do that. We need to do it. Critically important. Well, how's the road ahead look? Well, Airbus will tell you they see continued strong growth, and Boeing agrees with that wholeheartedly. Those are the curves we ride. I think this very, very exciting set of curves is what our company's great future is going to be based on. It's a fantastic look ahead. I'm very optimistic. But we still have to fix this set of curves where the airlines are losing money. We can't do that ourselves. It just has to happen by natural forces, the competitive forces. Airline travel is going to increase, especially the leisure travel. You will see capacity and demand and competition all balance here at some point in time. You're going to see a strong but consolidated industry in the very near future. And you're going to see them return to profitability. Our airline customers must. I love to quote Charles Darwin and remind you, he said, "It is not the strongest that survive, but those species that can adapt to change." Well, that's us. We're here as a species to adapt to the changes going on in our marketplace. And it applies to everybody, every company and every person in aviation. So I'll close with these comments. I said I would mention future-proofing yourself. What does that involve? Well, first of all, and you've already done that, and your presence here represents that, you got to seek and accept challenges in business. You got to develop your personal networks. It's the strongest tool we have in Goodrich for getting things done, is to have a network of people that you can rely on when you need counsel, advice, or help. You've got to help join this enterprise together. As a joined enterprise, we have fantastic power. And that's what Marshall's trying to unleash in the company today. You should explore processes in other industries. There's a lot of good things going on, automotive, electronics, wherever it may be. You need to do that. And of course, lead. You are leaders. You've got to be an agent of change, because change is what our industry is going to be about for many years to come. And compete. As I mentioned, it's a hyper-competitive industry. We have to compete. We have to know it. We have to know when we're competing, and we have to be aggressive in doing it. As my dad told me a long time ago, always hire smarter people, smarter than you are. Tough to do sometimes, but it'll get you the win long term. Because of the change coming up, you're going to have to be a lifelong learner. You're going to have to learn things that you can't even dream of today. How many people knew anything about the internet 20 years ago? It's our tool today. You've all learned that. And really work hard to say great things about your company. That buzz is infectious with customers, suppliers, with other people in the company. Work at it. And then finally, globalize yourselves. Accept diversity. Involve the planet. We got a whole planet out there that we serve that can come to work to help us in our goals. So with that, I'll say thank you very much. It's been fun. I'm delighted to have you as an audience today.